Shahzia Sikander is a Pakistani American artist. She grew up in Lahore, Pakistan, and moved to the United States almost 30 years ago. Her drawings, paintings, prints, mosaics, and animated films look at tradition, culture, and identity as ideas that change over time. Her interest in math and language led her to study illuminated Indo-Persian books at the National School of Arts in Lahore. She takes this traditional genre as a starting point for exploring and examining new ideas. Shahzia's work has been shown in museums all over the world, and the collection of the Museum of Modern Art includes some of her prints, paintings, and drawings. She won a MacArthur Fellowship in 2006 and is considered a pioneer of neo-miniature painting. I will let her explain what that term means. To see and learn more about Shahzia's work, you can visit the Museum of Modern Art, but also the Morgan Library and Museum in New York City, which has an exhibition of her work opening June 18th. We are so pleased to be joined by Shahzia Sikander today and excited to share a new picture book called Roots and Wings: How Shahzia Sikander Became an Artist. The story was a collaboration between Shahzia Sikander and Amy Novesky, with illustrations by Hanna Barczyk. We'll start today's presentation with a reading of the book by Amy Novesky. After that, Shahzia will talk about her art making practice, and then we'll have time for questions. So now, let's listen to the story.
Roots and Wings: How Shahzia Sikander Became an Artist. A girl steps into a painting, opens a door, enters a world, roams from room to room. A whole family lives here: parents, sisters, brothers, grandparents, aunts and uncles and cousins, dogs, rabbits, and cats too. The girl wanders and reads, observes, and draws. She paints a portrait of a girl. I am the girl. My home has many rooms. The rooms are filled with words, ancient fables, Russian fairy tales, poetry in English and in Urdu, Bollywood films, and American westerns too. Lahore, the city I live in, is rich with color and scent: hibiscus, rose, car exhaust. Men sell bright orange, sweet jalebi, and fragrant strings of jasmine on the street. Women wear the flowers around their wrists and necks. Qawwali songs and pop music fill the air. Melodic calls to prayer reverberate 5 times a day from majestic minarets. We kids play cricket down in the streets. I love to beat the boys at their games. I skateboard, I fly kites, I climb trees. My mother climbs trees too. She shakes the jamun branches. We catch the dark fruit in bed sheets and eat it, our mouths turning purple. Up on the roof, my cousins and I train pigeons. We free the flock and watch it take off, wondering if it will return. From here, I can see all the way to the horizon. The sky is dotted with colorful shapes, not birds, not bats, but a swarm of kites. On warm nights, my grandmother, my cousins, and I sleep outside, side by side, on jute beds. We watch stars spark and fireflies flash, their little lights, and our heartbeats in sync. When the city gets too hot, we take off too, go north. Quiet roads through pine forests, cool as cathedrals, long winding roads to the mountains, time and space framed by my car window. Once we traveled all the way to Rome, visited the Sistine Chapel, a kaleidoscope of color and wonder. Michelangelo and I share a birthday. At school, I am quiet, shy, curious. I am good at math, numbers, patterns, rhythms make sense. Math is truth and beauty, snowflake fractals, a constellation of fireflies. More even than math, I am good at drawing birds, owls, hawks, peacocks, pigeons, and people. Drawing, like math, is a tool, a way to figure out the world. I study miniature paintings with a magnifying glass. I see every detail, heroes and monsters, mythical birds and beasts. Miniature paintings are not small at all, but big. I'm an explorer discovering whole new worlds. I'm a heroine. At art school, I train in miniature painting for hours and hours with a master. Such an ancient art is not considered cool, and it is hard work. My first painting takes 2 years to make. But it is here where I make the old new. I paint my own world. I make the Vasily paper, the glue from flour and water. I paste them together, burnish it smooth with a seashell. I color the paper with tea, render it radiant. In hundreds of shells filled with a base of white, I mix paint from pigment and ink. So many pretty hues, pine tree green, mountain blue, sienna red, then a single sable hair, the smallest gesture. Art is my ritual, my ticket to new worlds. Armed with a plane ticket and a suitcase full of paintings, I take off. My family watches me, wonders if I will return. I take my roots with me. I land in America, but then I cannot leave. My passport is not the right color. My new country fears the country I am from. It will be 9 whole years before I can go home again, and so I work. So much time to confront, to think, to imagine, to draw, to paint, to create. And then one day, a green card allows me to travel once more. I can fly around the world, roam. I paint and show my work in Luau Prabang, Honolulu, Sharjah, Sydney, Seville, Istanbul, Berlin, Rome, Dhaka, Tokyo. Now I live in New York City. Here in Times Square, worlds intersect. The skyline fills with dark shapes, not birds, not bats, not kites. The wings of my imagination. So much time and space, I soar.
Well, I'd like to welcome Shahzia. It is so exciting to finally see this book, as I know it was in development for several years. Roots and Wings is about your early life and career. One of your early artworks inspired the first pages of the book, where the little girl, you, wanders from room to room. Can you share a bit more about your artwork? Also, what is a miniature painting and what excited you about studying this art form?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I would like to thank MoMA and my collaborators, Amy Novesky and Hanna Barczyk, for this beautiful project. And I am excited to share it with all of you guys here that have tuned in. I would like to share my screen so I can walk you through some older paintings, which will be fun to look at. All right, so do you, just checking, you do see that's
yes,
me.
exactly. Yes.
Magnifying glass at a at one of the smaller drawings. So, you know, I think I would like to say, just to for a very broad understanding, that miniature painting, the term itself, I would say it's a very complicated term. Some would even say a problematic term, because we are talking very broadly about visual manuscript painting traditions from Central and South Asia. And, you know, there are many. Like, I am looking here at these. They vary in size, as you can see. Also, this was an exhibition at the Met. So it is there are various historical styles and types that range across a wide geographical area and time frame, from the ones that I have been attracted to as early as 12th century all the way to 19th century. Impossible to speak to such a vast canon and tradition of manuscript painting without sounding simplistic. So with that aside, I will focus on the few paintings that I have loved for years, and that I can share my enthusiasm about with the audience here today. So this particular exhibition, which was up at the Met Museum, the artist Manaku, uses a very continuous narrative where it's about the Ramayana series, and you can see that some of these were never finished. So what I wanted to share was how the kind of spirit of the work, the action, the movement, the energy is right there. That for me is something that as a visual artist, I would totally gravitate towards. So this is a beautiful lyricism here, the way colors function in the way they are blocked into these shapes and forms. So you can read more about this particular work on the Met's website. Also, it's the epic poem Ramayana, where the story of Rama, heir to the throne of Ayodhya, and the abduction of Sita, his wife, by Ravana. So it there's a whole sort of adventure that unfolds. Then there's another example where miniature paintings would often accompany literary epic poems, religious texts, court paintings, different styles. So I wanted to show you that idea of the book format. And oftentimes we would look at the borders too, or some of the details. So just wanted to share some of these details, which I know were very inspiring, even in terms of how Hanna incorporated them into her own style when she was illustrating the book. Here's another example of my early understanding of miniature of the manuscript painting. So this is my work, which is a copy or a study of the painting. The actual painting is again at the Met Museum. So just wanted to show that kind of comparison, like as a student, how I would be. It was actually part and parcel of the learning curriculum to do these studies. Then there's another incredible manuscript, which is basically the Badshanama, which would be court painting. So this particular work is actually at the Windsor Castle in the Royal Library, and I was able to see it under the microscope. So you can see gorgeous detail. So then I made another work that references these sort of court paintings. So in my version, what happens is that because most of these narratives were around the documenting of the emperor's life, very male kind of discourse. So I basically said I was going to bring in all the feminine elements and populate that particular stage with all these little characters. And I made this painting. And then as I was developing the painting into animation, I thought of this idea of removing the bodies. And once the bodies left, they left behind like a mark, their hair. And then that shape of the hair is almost like a kind of a little bird or a bat, but small enough that it can become like a particle. And then with the animation, I have used this element I will share for many more projects also, but it becomes almost like a particle system. So it can choreograph and move around in space in many interesting ways. And then there's another way of interacting with the historical manuscript. So this one is also from the Badshanama, and I made an animation called The Last Post, which basically referenced the English history and the opium trade wars with China. So basically looking at the era of colonial engagement in India, in North India, and creating like a piece which is made out of drawings and then also with an original score. And its kind of narrative is very specific to that historical moment of the Opium Wars, but it also is open-ended with, because the nature of the language uses a lot of movement and drawings and ink. So lots of swirling imagery that kind of can reveal new associations and almost create new visual myths also. And then another experience of looking in the archives and the storages, gorgeous painting here. You can see how beautiful the details are on the borders, and kind of, there's a whole history of portraiture too. So then just wanted to show you guys how I have used portraiture, and portraiture becomes a strategy, a tool. I did portraits of myself and my father also. This was a long time ago, but you can get an idea of how like detailed these portraits are. And then I did another portrait of my father, obviously much later, because he's very much in the book. And I wanted to share this photo of mine with him. And this sort of another beautiful element that I gravitate to is the line drawing in many of the Indian paintings. Beautiful, gorgeous sort of line that facilitates movement. And I kind of played with that by looking at the composite school of painting and taking a lot of inspiration from there. So here you can see how this animation, which was kind of done a long time ago before even high definition. And here the composite character, sort of this mythical beast that builds up through its various elements. All the animals come together and then it falls apart. So it's a cyclical piece based on, again, taking a lot of freedom with how I wanted to interpret with the historical paintings. So then I just quickly wanted to share how the book became really a kind of a, it was inspired by a very early work, a seminal work of mine called The Scroll. And you can see how in the illustration itself, it shows the section where the female is the young character, the protagonist, the female, the heroine in the painting, in white, kind of transparent, ghost-like character. She's stepping over a threshold, which is symbolized as a frame, which is about, taking herself as well as the viewer into a new territory, a new beginning, a journey, which is very much what the scroll was and is, and what this book is also very much about. It talks about all these different spaces and rooms, which are metaphorical, but also kind of literal. Here you can see them in the actual painting. The painting is, I made this painting when I was a student. So this would be, when I started researching when I was 18. So made in Pakistan at the National College of Arts with my master painter teacher, Ustad Bashir Ahmed. And at that time, this painting was my thesis work. So the requirement at that time was to, kind of produce those smallish notebook size paintings. And I decided to make a 5-foot kind of massive miniature painting. And in this whole painting, I think of it as, again, like a epic poem. It could be an unfolding of an event, a lifetime, a story. It could be a day. It could be anybody's house. It could be my house. So I was looking at the Persian tradition of Safavid painting. So that's the painting you see on the right, attributed to the artist Behzad from 1487. And you can see how so many elements are in there, like the red fence, the tree, how it breaks it outside of the border, the way the perspective is stacked up. I also did a large scale 8-foot collage painting as a research also when I was developing the scroll. And here's another way where you can look at some of these architectural devices which show up in the book. And also you see in the painting, there are different characters throughout the narration. And oftentimes I was using inspiration from my own family, living in a multi-generational household with my grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins. So some snapshots from a long time ago. And here it gives you just a window into some of the other activities that would be happening. My cousins, like very outdoor, like in that era, we didn't have the screen time. So there were no computers. So a lot of it was like actually physically outdoors. So I think the book captures that quite beautifully.
I love Shahzia. I love seeing those images of your family. There's just from another time, but also the colors, and I can really see the connection. What Hanna Barczyk captured in the book, and also what's so lovely is the colors that I can see in the works that are inspiring you that she used in the book to tell your story. A lot of visual connection in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about your inspiration, the repetition of images and symbols in your work. Are there themes and ideas that you keep returning to over time?
Yes. So I wanted to share, a little bit on this, the cover image. I love this image that Hanna made. I remember when we made it, it was a long time ago. And it was like, it just won me over because it is referencing this mythical bird, the Seymour. And, so that's why I pulled this manuscript image, which is also the Shahnameh, and that is again this part of the Shahnameh is also at the Met. So the Seymour is a benevolent mythical bird in Persian mythology, and it's very much a feminine form, a female character, as well as maybe roughly equivalent to, you would say, a Seymour, a phoenix. So riding on this mythical beast is almost like riding on the wings of imagination, and that sort of is the reference right here in the book, The Roots and Wings. So I also did a painting of the Seymour when I was a student, and it is a copy, again, a study of the one of the Shahnameh. And here you can see more clearly this particular character. It appears in various forms throughout the tradition, and it's also referencing the epic story Conference of the Birds, which is a Persian poem by the Sufi poet Fariduddin Attar, and it's also Firdausi's epic poem, which is basically the Shahnameh, which is the Book of Kings, in which the Seymour also appears. So you can see how I'm linking myself to that tradition, right? By bringing the Seymour and finding my way, which is sort of symbolically there, but visually connecting to the history itself. Here is another representation of the Seymour, which is because Seymour would be considered, a search, a Sufi idea, a search for truth, a search for enlightenment. And that's carrying the human to that height where it resides, which is sort of at the meeting of the sky and the earth, is again the ability to use imagination, to think creatively. That's how I would think of this interpretive way of engaging with flight. And I wanted to share another theme here, where I have taken the wings from the characters on the top right, top left, and you can see that the wings become these sort of bursts on the painting on the right, which is a disruption as rapture. Also here clearly elaborating how the hairdress with the bun is removed and becomes like a symbolic little a particle system, which you also see on the right. And another element is another sort of how historical paintings inspire me. So you see the Vishwarupa, which is again another very abstract notion of how to depict a very big idea. So like, the idea of the universe or the beginning of the universe, and how do you encompass how artists have used that idea, how they've come to terms with it or illustrated it. And these sort of representations I wanted to share just to highlight how I've used it, where these sort of arms could be almost like they are fluttering, so they are in movement, attempting to fly. But you look at the form, and at the bottom are almost roots. So this is where the roots come from, where I have, here's a cleaner example of the character. They're kind of looped in as if you're carrying the roots within yourself, and you can still float around, but what is yours is yours. What is inherent is inherent. It can't be taken away. And that sort of is this idea of this form floating around, and this sort of experience of how to engage with the cultural space, identity, reading historical paintings, how to interpret them, how to take more creativity as a visual artist. So some of these paintings talk about that idea of being rooted or uprooted, and some of the forms you can see are playful in that way, like the female on the left, she's stepping on these loops. Is she wanting to escape, or is it the same? Is it the multiple identities within one person? I also was very inspired by children's stories, often at times looking at universal tales like the Red Riding Hood. So these are the different interpretations of that, and then kind of wanting to change the nature of some of the stories to make women more playful, confident, intelligent, and connected to the past in very exciting ways. So some of these characters, you can see the little girl that appears again, and here the character of this hybrid form, which is basically the griffin that you see in the front. I call it the chalaba, because the chalaba for me is coming from a Punjabi term of a form which is hard to capture, something that is so swift and moves and is maybe like a ghost, like a memory. So I was again questioning, how do we engage with our constantly changing, morphing notions of culture, tradition, and identity. So that's sort of the different themes, Liz.
Thank you. As I'm looking through all of these artworks, I wonder how long it takes you to create a work of art. Also, we started with this conversation about miniature painting. How has the scale and the materials you worked with changed over time?
Yes, so this is a beautiful little picture, and with the master painter Bashir Ahmed, I visited him recently, and here is me from a long time ago. I think beginning, as you can see, the scroll has not yet been painted, so it's like literally a very early stage. Some of the materials on the left would be, inks and opaque and transparent watercolor, sort of like different variations of gouache. And then, of course, I also paint large. So acrylic on wall would be another. I started to play with space and scale very early on. So you can see here how some of the iconographies that I was creating in my small drawings would leave that drawing the frame and kind of inhabit these larger scale spaces. So I started doing wall murals and paintings, and then, you know, recently they have become large scale permanent works. And here the material is all based. The ideas and compositions are done with drawing, but then it's also created with mosaic, which is a more permanent material. So you can see me working in Munich with the Franz Mir glass studio, and you can see the nature of the drawings also. So some of the drawings are done to scale. So even if the piece at Princeton is 70 feet and it's in different sections, and all those sections were done to scale. So the drawings can, expand and shrink and move in different ways. And I think that for me was very much the ideas that I was engaged with, is like how to open up this entire world and find as many interpretive possibilities through not just the forms and the language, but also through material. And once I kind of went in that direction, anything is possible. So here is another site-specific work, which is like a functional fountain, where the face is actually plays on Mary Magdalene. And I did this interpretive representation of that, I think, a while back when Tosca was playing at the in New York. And here the face emerges out of water, so you can see it more clearly if you're in the building next door and looking down. And then, of course, there is the MoMA banner, which was also done a long time ago, but just another way of how I would depart from different material and languages. So I wanted to not just revisit this idea, but like how my drawings been inspired by sculpture. So I was like, oh, it's time to make a sculpture. So when I wanted to do the take that sketch, which is very two-dimensional, into a three-dimensional space, you really had to solve how the iconographies, how the images work in 3D, right? So the reference again to Venus, Bronzino's Venus is there, but also to the Indian Apsara, which is a truncated form, is on site at the Met. So again, I'm engaging with historical languages, and you can see the piece here, which is after it was colored in patina. And mosaics, some of the mosaics are, they range again in scale. You were asking about sizes. They will go from 60, 70 feet to 8 feet. But at the detail level, the detail of the mosaic is still very minuscule, like a little unit, like the pixel, the digital pixel. Mm-hmm. So that's how sort of like things work, right? They work in conversation with each other.
Right. Thank you for that. I think seeing kind of you're so it's wonderful to see what you're referencing. I think it's just so interesting to know that you're constantly learning, you're constantly looking, seeking out new visual information, but also solving different problems, that as you've moved into different ways of kind of sharing your vision in these different media, you've had to look to others' artwork to understand how it could be, how you could make it your own. I'm just so fascinated. Before I ask you your next question, I do want to honor some of the comments that have been coming in our chat. First of all, how beautiful your artwork is. And what a powerful cover image the work the book. Somebody commented that it really captures your spirit, which I think is wonderful. And also, one person said, Saba had said how magical it was, that they loved how the characters leap out into the gallery wall, your artwork in the galleries, and how inspired they are by your artwork, and how they appreciate your hard work. So I just wanted to share that with you.
That is so touching. Thank you so much, all of you.
And we also have one person was very excited to see your face on their screen, and they are zooming in from India. So
okay, very exciting. It's different time zones everywhere.
It's very late in India right now, I would imagine. Sure. Very, or early almost. Yes. So you kind of touched on this a little bit, but if you could speak a little bit more about the ways in which you collaborate with others in making your art, and what that process is like.
Yeah, so collaboration is so beautiful, and I think for me as a creative individual, I'm always excited to find ways in which I can engage with others and understand their languages, and see how how there's so many crossovers and similarities, and yet we are so different. So that is sort of how even like without knowing how as a painter I could collaborate, I started, like, my curiosity was always there. So I started working with Sharmila Desai a long time ago. We ended up then eventually working and doing a project at the Aldrich, I think also at the Tang Museum. But just to share that she choreographed a beautiful dance based on hair. And then that's what those elements are. So I was taking this idea of the feminine hair and using it in choreographed movements, and then she made a piece on that. So that's one. Then I brought her into my small miniature painting. So there you see her in Elusive Realities. That's her in there too. There's another project, many projects. So I just wanted to give you quick snapshots. This is a beautiful project we did with the Quiet in the Land and with the curator France Morin. For me, it was wonderful to spend time in Laos, in Asia, and also understand, a lot of the history and visual traditions there. So I wanted to just bring in portraiture a little bit here back again, where you can see, like, I was also giving classes. So you'll see how these pencils are really sort of, all the lead has been exposed, they are thin, you can really go into detail and paint in that way. I've collaborated, like, I would consider that like teaching also very collaborative, a place of interaction and sharing knowledge with each other. I work closely with some artists, with the composer Du Yun, and here she was actually performing live the score for the last post. So there are these sort of performative spaces where we have worked with different poets around the world, depending on the project, depending on the direction of the work. This piece was in Sharjah, so of course it had to engage with local and colloquial Arabic. So then we worked with local poets. Another work we did in Istanbul. Over there, I also worked with, I involved Du Yun to compose the music, and while researching and visiting, we worked with many sopranos and different people there. So there's that nature. Then there's a piece done in Pakistan where with other musicians, Ali Sethi and Du Yun, involving the children's choirs and bringing that aspect into the work also. And so I find that very possible in my work, and especially in the medium, like video and music, which can oscillate and expand. There are no boundaries. It's very infinite, that space. So I kind of enjoyed that. So that gives you a little bit of different directions and possibilities that all start with a drawing. So everything starts with, thinking through the medium of drawing.
Fantastic. I'm conscious that we're getting short on time because I do want to make sure that we have time, but I do want to touch a little bit on your animation. You talked a little bit in your presentation, but if you want to talk a little bit about how you've transformed your artwork into getting involved in animation, that would be great.
Okay, so I'll go through this very quickly, Liz. You can see how I worked with mediums like wall drawings and paintings on these papers. So when I first started doing large scale works of this nature, I thought, oh, that's like building ideas and forms in literal layers. So that gave me the sense that you could see the work from multiple perspectives, and you could almost, open up all the elements, and in that possibility, I thought they become animated. And also physically, the transparent nature is such that you can see through all the layers, and the perspective would keep changing depending on where you stood. So that's what led, initially how I came to animation. And then of course, single channels moved into multiple channels, and here are some examples of work, parallax, that I did, which has exhibited around the world. Again, showing animation in Times Square, where it's a completely different audience, a different experience altogether. And here also these magical sort of formations, which would erupt at midnight, or almost like bats would descend. So there's that. Some of the animations still are tied to the actual book, so you can see the manuscript of Gulshaneh-ish. So this was a piece done with the Philadelphia Art Museum. The actual animation video is also located in the site specifically at the museum, but it has also traveled around the world and in different kind of scenarios, possibilities. Here beautifully like reflected in the pool, so you can hear the sound. It plays through the day and night in Pakistan at the gardens. So yeah, so that sort of is how animation allows a very different movement.
One of our participants just asked, how did I miss that in Times Square? And I feel the same way. That must have been quite an experience for you the first time seeing it on such a huge scale like that.
It was a great high. It was so thrilling.
Yeah.
Very, very exciting for sure.
Fantastic. So this will be my last set of questions, and then we will open it up for questions from everybody who's watching. But what is your daily routine like as an artist in general, but how has it changed during this pandemic? And I understand that you created a project with your son. So can you tell us about that as well?
Yes. So of course, this image is of me making work during the pandemic. So very much, the whole year. So I think what happened is like I was able to like not fight the frustration or the lack of mobility and focus back into these small paintings, which not just small, but meditative, right? So you can see me working here, very meditative. So I think then in that way, I kind of channeled that and did an exhibition in November, December. So a lot of this work was done last year. It had already been started, but it kind of, the focus happened when I was, during the COVID. So as an artist, I think it's, as creative individuals, writers, artists, you have to deal with being alone so many times, all the time. So this way of working with that was possible for me. And ups and downs, of course, I have a young child, and we started doing projects together. So he's always been sort of very much attached to wherever I go. So he's been exposed to art, and I make sure that that's him making the painting, the drawing on the left. So he also looks at the manuscript paintings to see different characters and forms. And we're always like, okay, how can you study it? How you study the form, and how do you make it your own? There's no one trick to it. Don't be like, oh, it has to look exactly how I see it. Don't get frustrated. So we've done live drawings, but just a quick little snapshot of him. He, of course, as a artist, I work, travel, so the child has been part and parcel of it. He was painting when he was a year and a half. He's been in my studio many nights, and then he was like, I want to work with the real inks and brushes and your material. So we've shared same stories. You can see how he also looks at the birds, and then this Seymour story he interpreted very differently, and that's how this kind of collaborative work came about, where he worked on it for a year, and it eventually showed at the Children's Museum. So it was a very wonderful collaborative project where he could be part of the exhibition as well. So that's my painting on the small painting on the left, and then that's his work. And so we continue. So that's what's going on now. We throughout the quarantine, we were working with different materials, with gold leaf, in even as recent as like last week with some sculpture.
That's so wonderful to use this time as a productive time for both of you. I would love to now share with you some of the questions that have been coming in from the other participants, the silent participants in our presentation today, coming from all over the world. The first one is, how did you become an artist, the artist you are today? When did you know that this was a good thing for you to do? That's from Serena and Lila. And then also related from Hasini is, why did you want to become an artist?
It was very clear to me that I was better at communicating by drawing than speaking up. I was very shy, and I could never open up my mouth, and and I would always be invisible. But as soon as I took that used that as a fuel to communicate through drawing, it gave me a sense of confidence. It gave me an ability to express, and that's literally started to happen very early, as a young child, and even as a young adult. So that was clear. And then of course it's been so many years, so it's constantly growing and challenging. It's never one way. It goes up and down, and every time you start a new project, it feels like, what am I going to do? You got to start all over again.
Right. I totally understand. Being in this environment, yes, we are all working towards different challenges. So, but the fact that you are constantly putting new ones in front of you is really fantastic, and that you keep doing it. Another question is, do you have a favorite artwork that you have created? That is from Tammy and Emma.
I do. Even the work that I showed that the book is inspired by, the scroll painting, definitely one of my favorite works. Even another work, Parallax, another sort of favorite. Recent work is always favored because it's closer in one's experience and memory, but it changes back and forth. What I really enjoy is like when the work has existed for a long time, and suddenly somebody sees it and there's new interpretations around the work. I find that really exciting, that it can speak across generation or across a different time frame, and I can rediscover the work too.
That's wonderful. A related question was, what was your last painting or artwork that you made, and who is your favorite artist?
Oh yeah, so and many of the early paintings that you saw of historical artworks like Bezag, I love that work. I love the Safavid painting form. I love Goya. I love Alice Neal right now. I've looked at so many female artists like Louise Bourgeois, who had a beautiful book, also children's book that Amy Novesky has written. So there's always constantly moving, changing. And, I kind of, I think I gravitate a lot to like themes around women, around female empowerment, and enjoy looking through different artworks done by women. It's always good to discover them because so many times their stories are usually hidden in history, so for that reason alone.
Well, since you mentioned the book, what inspired you to write a children's book?
Oh, I think storytelling is so much part of an artist's experience. Like, we want to communicate. And I think also the fact that these Indian manuscript paintings kind of come from this idea of the book. So I was toying with that. I've played, you can see behind me is another larger version of a kind of a manuscript, expanded very large with screen printing. So this idea came about naturally, and it was challenging. That's when I realized, it's harder for me to just write for a younger, different age group, as well as make illustrations for children. So that's why I was very excited that there was an opportunity to work with Hanna and Amy. So that's all. It just fell in place, but it took some time.
Here's it's kind of a two-part question, which is, how is your work contemporary? This is from Rubab and Abdullah, but also from Saba, you studied traditional miniature painting. Was there pushback as you began to explore more contemporary themes and techniques in your work?
No, not at all. I was very encouraged, once I was engaged in a very serious way, and the teachers could see that the student was very, dedicated. I was working sometimes 14, 18 hours every day. And so there was no question about, being restricted. I think one was naturally had to deal with this kind of tension and being confined, because the nature of learning some of the techniques was very slow and tedious, very laborious. And, that tension's always there. Even like collaborative, large scale, experiential works are across different languages, different people. They take time to make. There's never something that can get done in a shortcut manner. So once you kind of understand that and engage with time and with the respect that whatever time is needed to do the work, then that work for me has, similarities. So whether I'm working on a video work and making the drawings for it, or I'm actually physically painting a very detailed painting, both have slightly different relationships, but for me, they both are equally essential and interface with each other.
Wonderful. I do want to honor the fact that I did not mention a couple of people's names who had asked questions, which was the question about the children's book was from Noreen, Nyla, and Ijaz, and I want to say hello to Noreen. Also, we had a question from the favorite artwork question was from Tammy and Emma. I'm going to ask two more questions from people. One of them just came in, and that was, what do you think about the new crypto art? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not the right person to respond to that. Okay. I'm curious. I want to know. I'm reading, as all of you guys are, but that's all I can tell. For me, any new thing, there's always curiosity to read about it and see what it is, to educate yourself.
Wonderful. So this will be our last question, just to honor everybody's time, especially those who are up at 1:30 in the morning in India right now. So it's time to go to bed. Do you have any art advice for budding artists who are still in school? This is from Garji and Mitzi.
Yes, I always advise younger artists, students, is that you have to find the internal rhythm. You have to find something that makes you frustrated and happy and excited and brings out all sorts of emotions. It can never be about who's going to say what to that work or how it's going to be received. Like once your work is out in public space, you can't control what's going to happen to it. But at least while it's with you, you have to really feed it. So for me, often research is really critical. Reading, seeing films, movies, understanding, all different types of languages that will find ways to seep into the work. Finding a tight kind of community, because your work's never in isolation, it's always in conversation with others. So finding who that community is very critical too.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I am conscious of time, and so I first of all want to thank everyone for all of your wonderful questions. I hope that we've answered everything. I know that there were some questions about where to find out more about miniature paintings, and two things I want to mention about that, which is obviously the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York has a collection of works. It is not necessarily what MoMA collects. We collect more of Shahzia's work, but Shahzia, as I mentioned before, has an exhibition opening up very soon. It is called Shahzia Sikander Extraordinary Realities at the Morgan Library and Museum in New York City from June 18th to September 26th. I encourage you to check it out. And I want to give a huge thank you to Shahzia for preparing this presentation today and for sharing her artwork and process with her. I so enjoyed taking a deep dive into the work and hearing. I've been seeing the book for these many months as it was being developed, but to really see the connection to your own life and process was really special today. So thank you so much for that.
Yes, thank you, Liz. Thank you, all of you. Wonderful to be able to share the work, share some sources. It's a little bit of everything, but I'm happy that I was able to have this platform. I'm really excited about the books.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.